Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being.
Welcome to the 271st episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about recognizing a positive workplace wellbeing culture. Building on episode 270 a fortnight ago, where I predicted workplace wellbeing trends for 2025. Don't forget, the podcast is now fortnightly, but if you're missing weekly content, you have 5 years worth of work to reflect back on. And if you want my handy guide that lists the episodes with a clickable link, you can get it at bit.ly/DMPG23. Now, why do I want to talk about this today? Unfortunately, I'm aware that there were a number of redundancies in various sectors prior to Christmas and unfortunately going into the new year. So given that this is happening, and people, of course, are always looking for jobs, whether they've been made redundant or they want to move on or, throughout the years, throughout any time of year. But how do you know if you're moving into an organization that really does practice what it preaches when it comes to well-being? Because building a positive well-being culture in the workplace is not just a nice to have, as we know. There's lots of evidence, there's lots of data. You can go and listen to many podcast episodes where I talk about the number of stress incidences, and I talked about it in a fortnight ago in episode 270. The stress statistics, unfortunately, they're just not moving in the right direction. They're not changing. And it is about a transformative investment in health, productivity, and overall satisfaction of employees when workplace wellbeing is done correctly and adeptly. Because fostering a positive workplace wellbeing culture leads to more engaged teams, reduces burnout, and creates a greater sense of belonging. And I think too often it's a case of having talks for specific awareness days and then nothing else happens. As a member of staff, it's about making sure the workplace meets the needs you have. And if you're a leader or manager, it's about making sure initiatives you have are supporting staff and it's a good use of investment. As I said, tokenistic initiatives don't cut it, and you need to be bigger, bolder, and braver than this, especially to stand out and retain talent. Building a positive workplace wellbeing culture is a continual process, and it does, as we know with everything, require effort, empathy, and it has to be embedded into all strategies. And if you're an HR professional or people and culture professional, CEO, any part of the C-suite, the journey starts with clear goals, accessible resources, and leadership practices that put wellbeing at the core and center of this to the employee experience. It shouldn't be a knee-jerk reaction to an employment tribunal case or something that's gone horribly wrong. Now, I'm not saying we can always prevent things from happening. I'm not saying we can always stop people from making complaints or making grievances or deciding to file for an employment tribunal case. But there's lots that we can do that's not just within the law, but of course enhances that legal protection. And when it's done right, I have definitely seen teams and organizations flourish. There's much more positive communication, innovation, reduced grievances, positive sickness management. It's not about stopping people going on sickness if they need it, but it's that positive sickness management and increased profitability. And I remember I did a piece of work, a really long piece of work, actually. I worked with ASOS for over a year, several years ago. And this is an example that I'm just so impressed with. And I mentioned it to someone the other day, and I want to share it here. I went in to deliver 2-day mental health first aid training for them. And after the first day, the delegates were so inspired. They just launched this great campaign. So after the 2 days, they said, oh, right, well, we've spoken to our marketing team. We're going to create some assets, digital assets, physical assets. We've got our Care Bear costume hired, and we're going to be handing out leaflets about being mental health first aiders. And they had a really great program. And the mental health first aiders were absolutely signposting, resourcing people, working with management. And then the legal team a few years later did a specific event on HR and wellbeing for their sector, so for corporate lawyers in-house. And so those are examples of when things go really right, not practicing what they preach, and there was resource and support behind people. So I really hope you're enjoying the content of this podcast and want to keep up to date. If you are, then why not join my newsletter? When you join my mailing list, you'll receive a copy of my ebook, The Mentally Healthy Leading Manager. And that link is bit.ly/MHLMEBKLNK. So how, as a potential employee or current one, indeed, can you spot coherence and recognize a positive workplace wellbeing culture? Well, the first one is, no surprises, open communication and transparency. And what we're looking for here, or some indicators, I'll reframe that. Key indicator is looking for a culture where open communication is encouraged. And you might see things like regular check-ins, a slot at team meetings to check in on well-being or to go around the space and see how everyone is. And also a very clear, coherent, tried and tested process for raising well-being concerns, and chatting to people and seeing, what is the process? Is it easy to read? How much or how little are HR involved? How formal or informal it is? And I think this is really important. So what is the iterative process for raising concerns, or actually just feeding back and saying, oh, this works well, but we could make it even better by ... And that links into a lot around psychological safety as well. The second thing is mental health awareness and support resources. So again, we're not talking about flash in the pan things, but really noticeable support for mental health. So there might be on the homepage or your intranet, actually, so the intranet, which you might not have access to, of course, if you're interviewing for something, but you could ask about it in the interview to say, oh, I'd really love to know where your well-being resources are held. And when you go into the intranet, where do they feature on that page? So visible well-being resources, if you're having a physical interview, walking around the space and seeing what you can see. And I think this is really useful, actually. I always would get to interviews early and have a look at the space and have a look at the notice boards. Now, of course, that's shifted slightly now. We don't have as many paper resources, but anything that you can see, internal campaigns for promoting mental health awareness, ask questions about that at your interview, and leaders who are actively championing mental health as a priority. You know what, you can go on LinkedIn, see if they've had any of the senior leaders in an organization are talking about mental well-being. If they're looking at sickness absence stats, look at what the HR managers are doing, ask those questions. The third one is leadership that prioritizes well-being. So have there been any leaders in this organization speaking about mental health and well-being, their own journey, which is part of the picture, because I think people can often talk about themselves and not really recognize other people. But it can also be really helpful to know if leaders are talking about their own mental well-being journeys or processes or blips in the road, and what the organization does. That can be really helpful. Also, what are the well-being stories within all sorts of leadership in the organization? So is there a diversity of voices being acknowledged? Are there things around showcasing workplace adjustments, disability support, financial well-being support? Think about what's actually being showcased, and any active measures to look at within leadership courses. How are they integrating well-being processes? I think that's really, really important. The fourth one is around work-life blend and supporting employee boundaries. So it's all very well saying, oh, you don't have to answer emails outside of work hours, but actually, is that really adhered to, and is that the case? So what about the respect for working hours? A question you could ask is around, how people with any kind of caring responsibilities are supported. Looking at flexible working policies, you could ask to see a copy of that. If you're a current employee, have a look at your flexible working policy. Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it easy to apply for flexible working? If you don't get the request, if your request is not agreed to, what are the appeals processes or the discussions around that? I think that's really good. And this should be a standard practice, of course, because it is the law rather than a perk, or seen as a perk. So this is quite a good indicator of workplace wellbeing focused culture. And again, if you're going for an interview somewhere, or you have access to certain elements of the website, have a really good look at that. I think another good indicator is if there are particular profiles on any recruitment pages of people who work flexibly. That can be a really good indicator, of staff who have put their name to this and said, actually, I really do love working here, and this is my flexible working experience. Or also, my manager, absolutely, I can't answer emails after 6 o'clock, and I don't, and I'm very supported with that. You can also have a look at people's signatures. Do they have that on their signature? That's only one piece of the puzzle, but at least that can be part of signature. So that's really, I think, useful as well. The fifth one is around opportunities for growth and development. So we know that workplaces that champion employee development, regular training opportunities, coaching opportunities, progression reports, looking at length of service and kind of the shift of people in an organization, or do people leave and come back again because it's such a positive place, things like that. And again, these are questions you can ask within an interview. What are the growth and development opportunities? What are the in-house learning programs that you have? Do you have an internal coaching academy? What are the opportunities to get a coach? Maybe they do have informal mentoring, but I think the coaching stuff is really important as well. I identify training program. What's the funding, or what are the funding arrangements for that like? And again, you can also ask these questions as a current member of staff as well. Now, you may be a current member of staff and you've asked these questions and you don't get an answer, or you keep getting pushed back, or you get told there's no funding. Now, often I realize there can be no funding, but are there opportunities for people to apply for funding or to be able to have conversations about grants? So that's another element of it, particularly in the charity and third sector areas. Sixth area is recognition and appreciation. So what is the appreciation culture? What is the recognition? Because we know that a culture of appreciation does create that buzz, that inclusivity. It's really energizing when employees are acknowledged for their contributions. And this doesn't have to be financial acknowledgement. It could be being thanked. It could be showcased in a newsletter. It could be tea and cake afternoon. There are lots of different things, but how are staff encouraged to celebrate each other's successes? There used to be something called ROSE, sort of reward and recognition schemes, any schemes that are available, how managers put people forward. There are lots of questions that can be asked around this, actually. And I think this can be trickier when you're a current member of staff. If you're part of a staff network or trade union, these are questions that can also be asked of an organization. The seventh area is around empathy and compassion within leadership, and management, I would say, because in compassionate work culture, employees will describe their leaders as approachable, understanding, flexible, genuine, and really invested in their well-being, and knowing that they're going to be ups and downs for everyone. As I always say, very few, if any of us, will be completely mentally 100% for the entirety of our lives. And I don't think, the challenges that life throws at us, it's not really possible. So yes, so all of that, and recognizing that, and also how well-being is asked about. So is it one-to-ones? Is it in team meetings? All of those sorts of things. And then the final point here about recognizing a positive workplace wellbeing culture is shared responsibility for wellbeing. So a workplace should have a shared responsibility, like with equality and diversity, like with anything, like with health and safety, corporate social responsibility, environmental. It's exactly the same here. So the shared responsibility might look like taking turns at team meetings to bring in cakes. That could be an example, or food that's appropriate for the team members. So that's a very small thing. It could be initiatives that employees and staff members are given the opportunity to lead initiatives, that they're peer support networks that people have the time to attend and be part of. I think that's really important. And teams that actively engage in wellbeing activities together. So that could be a question that could be asked. That could also be something that you propose as a current member of staff. So they're just kind of 8 things. They're more. I mean, I think there's quite a lot around policies, procedures, processes. You could also look at data. You could also look at the number of employment tribunals, for example. That a lot of people don't get to that stage because it's a big process to go through. But you could look at data like that as well. And now that you've heard this, what are your thoughts? Have you had any experience of the above in terms of positive? Or have you moved from one organization that had very little in place to an organization that's been really brilliant and has had a lot in place? So I think in essence, it's about recognizing what wellbeing perks you would like as a staff member and what would make you feel valued as a staff member. If it's a job, an organization that you're thinking about applying to, do your research and definitely think about the questions you want to ask at the interview. Remember, interviews are a two-way process. You need to assess if it's the right organization for you and help you recognize that positive workplace culture. Check out any reviews and see what's the real side to maybe some well-being washing, if that's the case, or well-being commitments, and negotiate prior to starting a role if there's anything you'd really like to see. And of course, creating a positive workplace wellbeing culture is beneficial for employees because it really does boost morale, engagement, and retention across the organization. And if you're looking to foster a positive wellbeing culture and would like guidance on creating strategies and initiatives tailored to your team and organization's needs, then I would love to help you. Reach out to explore our training, consultancy, and coaching services designed to help you build a healthy, resilient, and positively productive workplace. You can get in touch with me at Layla, Leyla, at diverseminds.co.uk. And I really hope you've enjoyed today's show and, of course, the shows over the last 5 years. And if you have, why not leave me a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from. And as always, I love to hear from you as listeners. Remember, you can leave me an anonymous or with your name voice note on SpeakPipe, and that is bit.ly/SPKPDMP. And don't forget my TEDx talk, where I talk about my experience of navigating race, culture, and mental health in the workplace. And it's something you can watch in your break, as it's just 12 minutes long. And the link is bit.ly/TEDx Wolves, WOLVESLO. I really hope you enjoy it, because it was a labour of love. And if you do, please leave a positive comment on YouTube, share and like. So I would love to hear from you. I hope you found this useful. Do join me again in 2 weeks' time, where we'll be starting a new theme for February. So until then, everyone, take care, and I'll catch you in the next episode. For now.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.